Why do we read horoscopes? We know, logically, that stars millions of light years away probably don't have an opinion on our Tuesday meeting, and yet we're drawn to them, aren't we? It's because we're all looking for a map, a guide to our own complex inner world. Well, what if I told you the real astrology of the 21st century isn't written in the sky, but in data? Today, we are diving deep into the science of you.
Just think about it for a second. Why are some people always the life of the party, while others would much rather be in a quiet corner with a good book? Why do some of us plan every single detail of a vacation, while others just go? This isn't random. There's a pattern to it, a kind of psychological signature that follows us around. It's what makes you, you. The real question is, what does that signature actually look like? So here's our game plan. First, we'll get to grips with the personality puzzle itself. Then, we're going to decode the Big Five, which is the most scientifically backed map of human character out there. After that, we'll look at your biological blueprint, the hardware you're running on. We'll explore the super interesting situation paradox, and then, the best part, we'll see how you can use all this to actually design a life that fits you like a glove.
All right, so let's start with the absolute basics. When we psychologists throw around the word personality, what on earth are we actually talking about?
The most important word on this screen is consistent. See, personality isn't about that one time you did something out of character. It's about your recurring patterns. It's the reason your friends can look at something you do and say, oh yeah, that is so typical of them. It's that stable, predictable core of you that shows up again and again.
So if personality is our consistent pattern, how do we map it? Well, for decades, researchers sifted through mountains of data. And what they found was that 5 core dimensions kept popping up over and over again across all kinds of cultures. This became known as the Big Five.
And listen, this isn't just some fringe theory or a pop psychology fad. This is the gold standard. It's the most robust, widely accepted framework we have for understanding the fundamental building blocks of who we are.
Now, the easiest way to remember these 5 factors is with the handy acronym OCEAN. That stands for openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. But a crucial point here, these aren't neat little boxes you fit into. They're spectrums, and every single one of us lands somewhere along the continuum for each trait. All right, first up is openness. You can think of this as your appetite for novelty. If you score high here, you probably love new ideas, art, abstract concepts, and exploring different cultures. If you score lower, you likely find comfort in the familiar. You prefer routine, tradition, and things that are straightforward and down to earth. Next, we have conscientiousness. This is like your inner architect. It's all about your capacity for discipline, for order, for seeing things through. Someone high in conscientiousness is probably dutiful, organized, and reliable. Someone lower on the scale tends to be more spontaneous, flexible, and sometimes, a little chaotic. Then there's extroversion. This trait is all about where you get your energy from. Extroverts feel energized by the outside world, by social interaction, activity, and engagement. Introverts, on the other end of the spectrum, are the opposite. They recharge their batteries with quiet and solitude. It's not about being shy, it's about energy management. Agreeableness is basically how you approach social harmony. If you're highly agreeable, you're likely to be empathetic, cooperative, and you value getting along with others. If you're lower in agreeableness, you tend to be more competitive, skeptical, and you're not afraid to challenge things, even if it ruffles a few feathers. And finally, we have neuroticism. The best way to think about this one is as your internal alarm system. It's a measure of your emotional stability and how sensitive you are to stress and negative feelings. A high score means your alarm system is pretty sensitive. You're more prone to worry and anxiety. A low score means you're more resilient and emotionally steady. Now here's where it gets really mind-blowing. These traits, they aren't just habits you've picked up over the years. The evidence suggests they're deeply rooted in our biology. Think of them less like software you can install or delete, and more like the actual hardware you were born with. Let's just take that classic introvert versus extrovert example. It's not just about whether you like parties or books. It turns out it's about fundamental biological differences in how your brain is wired from the get-go. So here's the theory from psychologist Hans Eysenck. He suggested that extroverts are walking around with brains that have a lower baseline level of arousal. They're kind of naturally understimulated. So they go looking for loud music, crowds, and excitement to wake their brains up to an optimal level. Introverts, they're the complete opposite. Their brains are naturally more aroused, so they seek out quiet and calm to avoid getting totally overwhelmed.
So how much of this is just baked into our DNA? Well, study after study in behavior genetics points to a pretty consistent number. About half, around 50% of the differences we see between people on these personality traits can be chalked up to our genes.
But, and this is a really big but, our genes aren't our destiny. As the great psychologist Jerome Kagan put it so perfectly, genes are just one ingredient in the recipe. Our culture, our experiences, our relationships, even just sheer luck, they all have a massive role in shaping who we become. And this brings us to a fascinating puzzle. If our traits are so stable and partly genetic, why don't we act the exact same way all the time? This is known as the situation paradox. You are a consistent person, sure, but you are not carved from stone. The simple truth is that context is king. You can be a dyed-in-the-wool introvert, but at your best friend's wedding, you might be out on the dance floor all night. You can be a highly disagreeable person, but you'll be sweet as pie when your kid needs comforting. Our behavior is really a constant dance between who we are deep down and what the moment asks of us.
So how do we manage that dance gracefully? Well, one of the most powerful tools we have is something psychologists call if-then strategies. It's about turning a vague intention into a concrete situational plan. So instead of just saying, I want to be more patient, you create a rule. If I start feeling frustrated in traffic, then I will take 3 deep breaths before reacting. It's a simple, brilliant way to help your consistent self navigate tricky situations.
So, what's the point of all this? This is where everything we've talked about becomes incredibly practical and empowering. Because knowing your Big Five profile isn't about getting a label stamped on your forehead. It's about being handed the user manual to yourself.
There's this amazing concept called person-environment transactions. It basically means we aren't just passive blobs being shaped by our world. We actively seek out, react to, and even create environments that vibe with our personalities. An extrovert doesn't just stumble into parties, they hunt them down. A conscientious person doesn't just find an organized desk, they make one.
And that right there is the big idea. For so long, the message of self-help has been about fixing your flaws, forcing the introvert to become a star public speaker, or trying to make the spontaneous person love spreadsheets. But the science points to a much smarter, more compassionate path. True power isn't about fighting your own nature. It's about intelligent life design. It's about finding the job, the relationships, the hobbies, your own personal niche where your factory settings are an advantage, not a handicap. So I'm going to leave you with this question to chew on. Knowing what you now know about your own unique settings, what is one environment in your life, maybe it's a project at work, a weekend hobby, or even a type of conversation, where your personality isn't something you have to overcome, but something you can finally unleash? Because finding that place, well, that's the real art of being yourself.